Alright, so we're on the second race of the Rosewood series presented by Aminorip and Ziel. And going into this race, we had plans to keep the pressure on. We had a full squad, and we had Torcat in the lead, and he's just a baller sprinter. You know, if you bring him in a breakaway, 9.99 times out of 10 you're going to lose the sprint to him. He's just explosive. So the main goal is to keep him out of the break or keep the pace so high that they had to work. Sebastian, I believe, was in 3rd or 4th overall, and I was in 5th or 6th, somewhere along there. So we had 2 people in the top 10 that we had to work with. Today is actually, in this race, was, you know, I've always had an LA. I raced the LA last year at Athens and had really good success on that bike and kind of bounced around to different bikes. But now I'm back on the LA, and the Hulk is what everybody calls it. You know, it's a cool bike. It's super responsive. It's a little bit heavier, but for a crit bike, you know, you can feel confident that if you crash, it's gonna handle it well. So right now, this is kind of just little, you know, we kept the pressure on early into the race, and we kind of had some breaks go up the road, and you know, if the right people weren't in the breaks, I would try to bring them back or bridge to them. And most of the time it's kind of the same people that get into these breakaways, and we didn't want it to kind of turn out with pulling sprinters around in the breakaway. And one thing I learned is that I always got to pay attention to who's in the break or who's working, and that's something I'm not really good at. I like to just drive the break until the finish, and sometimes it works, but most of the time I get out sprinted at the end, and I kind of feel like it's my fault. So now having a team and having a sprinter that, you know, we can pay attention to and work towards and get him where he needs to be is going to be a lot better for the whole year. The break that eventually goes up the road, I believe we have Torcat in it, Michael Hernandez, Sebastian, Lewis from Ziel, and 2 other guys that they worked hard. But there was a couple times, you know, it took a while for us to get really organized with the breakaway. There was a lot of confusion in the beginning and people skipping poles, which that's racing. So you always got to pay attention to who's skipping a pole, who's the stronger sprinter. And I know probably out of everybody in the breakaway, I'm the weakest sprinter. And, you know, I have a good sprint, I think, for most of the time. But if I'm driving a breakaway, I can't sprint. I don't have the power, I guess. So as you can see, the heat is kept on the entire race. Got a small group of guys up the road, 2 or 3 people. Very long stretched out. We actually had probably like 10-mile-per-hour winds on this back section through the turns, so that kind of made people work a little bit harder. So a lot of this race, it was very strung out until that actual breakaway established, probably 30 minutes in. So right now, I think this is the breakaway, and I have to bridge. So I take this corner, coming around, and this is super sketchy right there. I mean, I thought I was going off the road, but somehow I pulled it out. I bridged to the break, and that's where it starts, and that's where we start grinding it. You know, last week I had a pretty good, I didn't crash, but I ruined my tire, so I gotta give a shout out to Naples Masters for getting me hooked back up with a new tire and getting me back into this race. So that was much appreciated. But as you saw, Torcat just flew past me, and that's the main sprinter, that's the leader jersey. So at this point, I know my teammate Sebastian's up the road, so I really wasn't going to work too hard to get into that breakaway because I saw him. But as soon as I saw Torcat, I knew I had to make it happen. So I tried to gut myself and turn myself inside out to get onto the wheel of Hernandez, which is just driving this. And he flicks the elbow and he wants someone to help close that gap, but Sebastian's up the road, so I really don't want to help anybody get up to that breakaway. So I kind of back off and see what happens, and they hit it again, so I'm going to go. And this is where like team chemistry comes into play, and we are always chatting, me and the Aminorip boys. Almost every day we're talking about how we can get better as a team, how we can work better, and this is where it matters, because you can't be closing down gaps for other people to bring them to your sprinter that's in a breakaway. Even no matter how mad people get at you for not helping, it's racing, it sucks, and at the end of the day we're all friends and we all say good job. Oh, I can't believe you didn't close that gap, but I'm not going to close that gap for you. I'm just not going to. So there's always a plan, and we got the guys in the back that are just covering every attack that's going off of that group. So I think it's in like 3 separate breaks right now. So as you can see, I'm breathing like a goldfish out of water. I don't know why I do that. I'm sucking down the O2. That was a huge effort. I don't have a power meter. Next week I will have a power meter. Gus from Gus Mobile Bike is coming over to pick it up and get that power meter all installed from Javier. So that was really cool. So next race we will actually have power overlay. I think at this point we have 10 seconds on the field, so it's still not really established. And from after the race, after talking to all the guys, they didn't really give up until we were 30 seconds up the field, or up the road. And we actually end up lapping the field. And talking to Hernandez after the race, I personally didn't really want to lap the field because I felt confident that Sebastian could win the sprint if we were in that breakaway with just the guys that were in it. But Hernandez after the race was talking about like he wanted to get into it because you can rest, there's different opportunities and things like that, which it makes sense. But I didn't want to be there. And as soon as we lapped and we caught them, it was, all of us tried to get to the front and try to control the race and rest as best as we could for that main sprint. And one thing I'm always trying to do when I'm in a breakaway with these guys is that, a lot of these guys have a lot more experience than me in racing. I only have 2 years of experience, so I'm always trying to learn from the veterans like Lewis or Sebastian or Hernandez that raced on the Tour de California, Torcat, which is a great sprinter, and how his technique works and how well Lewis and him are working together this year, being first-year teammates. So that was really cool to watch. But my main goal is to make sure I kept everybody working as much as possible, especially Torcat. It's just somebody, like I said, you don't want to bring to the line. And Lewis keeps his cool throughout the entire race. Anytime I've ever been in a race with him, he stays calm. So that's something to be said for it, And there's so many times in this race that I thought I was going to get dropped because I tried to do some stupid move where I blocked somebody or I didn't really rotate through to a pole, and then they would counterattack me. And there's a couple times that, my heart rate got up there. So let me talk a little bit about this course. This course is the Brian Piccolo. It's at the park in Cooper City. And I feel like every time we come here in January, there's crashes. And I don't know if it's because everybody's so amped up the race that the speeds are just higher. But I posted a video last year that had like 100 and something thousand views on it, where we had 8 crashes, 8 unexplained crashes of just pure chaos. And last week we had the same thing, a pedal clip going into the final turn. So a lot of people were a little bit more careful this time around, and once the brake went up the road and you're working with only 6 guys, that risk of crashing decreases. And that's another thing why I've lapped the field a couple times at this park, but I'd rather just stay off the back, because that last corner, even though you lap the field, people are still amped to do this final sprint, and you're getting tied up with all these people to sprint that you could potentially, it's January, and I'm not trying to break my collarbone in January. So I get the pros of being in the break or lapping the field, but there's a lot of cons that for January, that's a huge risk. So that was sketch. But it was a beautiful thing. Once we did get into the main field, all of the Aminorip boys went all the way up to the front and tried to control that pace and control the lead out, and was setting everything. There's definitely some things that we can work on as a team to make it a little bit better, but it was awesome. So there I'm kind of letting up a little bit. I see Sebastian go up the road. I'm just going to kind of pull off a little bit. And that back wind section is where I kind of want to go up and do my work and protect my sprinter from doing any kind of work into that heavy wind. The tailwind section, everybody can work there. So at this point, we all settled in. We're all rotating pretty good with each other. We know we're away at this point, and there's not really a chance of them catching us. So we're all kind of taking our even turns and rotating like we should. But there's the back of the field at this point. So I'm kind of like, oh man, I know we're going to catch them. I really don't want to. So Sebastian kind of takes the turn, a little bit more mellow. I don't really pull through. I just kind of want to see what happens. And he goes first, and then Hernandez goes. And I go, okay, so we're going to the break. We're going to the main field. And honestly, here's another point. I was like, oh, I'm going to get dropped. And explosive. Go. And during the whole breakaway thing, the leader jersey, Torcat, actually ended up getting dropped out of that breakaway. So that threat of the main sprinter for Ziel was out of the question at that point. So now we had Lewis, which is a super strong, last lap flyer guy, and also can sprint. As you can see from this race, it was literally by in the millimeter that Lewis got first, and Sebastian got second, and Hernandez got third. So So you see all the chaos that's happening right now. The pace is getting picked up. It's just kind of causing a little bit of panic between the field, and that, you know, we lapped them and now we're trying to make our way up to the front. Everybody's kind of, certain people are resting, and that's kind of making me nervous, because when people are resting, they're getting ready for that sprint. Or you just don't know where they're at in the field. There's so many people that you're kind of like always looking around. Where are they at? Are they up front? Are they behind me? And that's a lot too. So at this point, Aminorip went to the front and they controlled the pace, and I'm going to go ahead and move forward and try to join them in keeping the pace high, not really letting a whole lot of people come around us. Right here, you know, I'm right there on the right. Anthony's telling me to go back to rest. He's actually yelling at me to go rest. Good times. It ended up being a good thing that I didn't sprint. I ended up breaking my spoke somewhere along the lines of this race, so God knows what would have happened if I actually got out of the saddle and sprinted. For all I know, my back wheel would have tacoed and I would have ate it. Couple guys that were off the front trying to bridge to us. Actually, I don't know if they were dropped or off the front. I think they were off the front. Yeah, they were off the front. So now the whole field's back together. I'm sweeping around the left side. I want to keep the pace high. Joito's going to come up, pass me, bring it back up, string out the race, and I think we're going into like 2 laps to go at this point. I mean, we had a perfect lead-out train going for a long time. So at this point, I'm going to go. I know there's a lap and a half left. I want to go. I want to string it out. I want to pull everybody out that's resting to get them spinning a little bit, get that heart rate up, to hope that maybe I'm burning their last match. So I gun it. And the speedometer's all off on this, so take it for what it is. Next week will be so much better once I have a power meter. It's just going to make so much more sense. My race is done at this point. I drop off and I kind of let everybody go. I already lapped the field, so I already know I don't really have to sprint against all these guys, and I'm not really going to out-sprint Sebastian or go against my own teammate, and it's his time. He's been doing the work. It's his time. And there's that typical Lewis flyer. So Lewis goes, going into the final left turn. Hernandez jumps. going into the straightaway right now, and it's go. And you're gonna see there's a photo at the end of this video that it's basically a bike throw away, with Lewis taking it and Sebastian getting second, Hernandez third. So that kind of leaves us, I think I got fifth overall. So that leaves us with Sebastian and Hernandez tied for first, and me in fifth place overall. So that's good. 2 team members in the top 5. Going into race number 3. That's going to be this Sunday. So look forward to making another video and telling you guys all about that. Deuces.